Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Centrist Inc. YouTube channel. My name is Lauren Morris, and today we have a very special guest, Clare Lopez. She's the founder and president of Lopez Liberty, LLC. She's a national security expert who teaches and writes widely for numerous publications. She was a career CIA operations officer with the focus on the Soviet Union and Russia, and has trained special forces at Fort Bragg and military intelligence officers. Lopez has served as a national security advisor for 2 presidential campaigns and was VP for research and analysis for 6 years at the Center for Security Policy. So, Clare, thank you for coming to the channel and welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So there's a lot going on. It's crazy out there in the world. And so we kind of would like to get your assessment in a general sense initially on what is happening in the Middle East. And what are your thoughts currently on what's happening in the Middle East?
Okay, so how much time do we have here? I guess what we have to look at is the changing scenario in the Middle East. For a long time, the United States exerted power and influence in the region. We were strongly allied with Israel, the one and only functioning democracy in the region, our best friend and ally in all of the Middle East. And then under the Trump administration, we also reached out to some of the Arab neighbors in the region and formed the Abraham Accords, which included United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Morocco, and Sudan, with every hope that other regional governments would join that shortly. Certainly, we understood that the Saudis were behind and supportive of the Abraham Accords, even though they had not signed on formally themselves. But with the new young dynamic leadership of Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince and son of the currently reigning King Salman, Saudi Arabia has been going in a different direction than before. Many young people in the country, of course, big youth cohort, who absolutely support MBS and everything he's been trying to do to open up the country. Now, this is not only just because of the goodness of their hearts, but because they know that they need foreign investment and technological development that is not an economy relying only on extractive industry, oil and gas, as had been the case for many decades. But they know they need to expand, and they also know that Israel, of course, is no enemy to them, no threat to them, but rather can be a partner for that technological development in so many areas: agriculture, water development, medical, computer sciences, all of that and more. And that is why the scene was changing in the 4 years of the Trump administration. I knew, for example, when President Trump took his very first trip abroad in his presidency, and that was May of 2017. And where did he go? He went to Riyadh and met with, all of the gathered, Sunni leadership of regional neighbors' governments. I knew things were changing then. Unfortunately, the progress since that, 2021 until now, we're here in June of 2024, has reversed an awful lot of that, or at least put a stop to it, a kibosh on it. And so, of course, we've seen the Islamic Republic of Iran rising in power and influence now, according to the IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency, literally on the cusp, on the verge of deploying deliverable nuclear weapons, which is a threat to, of course, Israel, but to the entire region and to the United States as well, which we have so many military and diplomatic facilities across the Middle East region. But somehow our current administration thinks that Tehran can and should be a partner or somehow lead what they call regional integration, whatever that means, of the Middle East. And so this administration of ours has sided with Iran, allowed gabillions of dollars, in particular in oil revenue, to flow into the coffers of the mullahs by not enforcing sanctions that may not be removed, but they're waived or they're just not enforced. And so the Iranian regime has backed and supported any number of Islamic jihadi terror groups, anything from Hezbollah to Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the Houthis of Yemen, the Hashd-e-Shaabi in Iraq. And that doesn't seem to get much of a response from our current administration. But of course, with the October 7, 2023 Shabbat massacre invasion of Israel by Hamas, things changed. And Israel, with or without us, understands that it is existential for the Jewish state of Israel to ensure that Hamas can never again govern in Gaza or militarily threaten Israel. And at the same time, of course, Israel has to look to its north, where the Islamic regime's number one terror proxy, Hezbollah, has been nonstop launching rockets and missiles and drones into the northern, well, more than the northern, but areas of Israel, forcing something like, I think I've seen the number 80,000 Israelis to relocate from the north further into the central part of Israel for safety. And we're looking probably at an imminent Israeli military action to the north. Hezbollah absolutely must be pushed north of the Litani River, which lies around 10, maybe a little more, 12 kilometers, miles from the Israeli northern border. And indeed, after the 2006 war, Israel and Hezbollah, the United Nations Resolution 1701 mandated that all militias inside of Lebanon be disarmed. That was supposed to mean Hezbollah, which never happened, and UN deployed UNIFIL, United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, to supposedly oversee the disarmament of Hezbollah and other militias, and intersperse themselves between the Israeli northern border and at least the Litani River. That didn't happen, and it looks like now Israel is going to have to do that. So I don't know. That's kind of where we are right now.
I have a couple of questions in that regard. It appears there's a big vacuum happening right now in Gaza. Who could step up and actually govern that? Would there be a two-state solution? And what would you advise President Trump right now going into this situation as it is right now? How would he reframe relationships with Iran, stop the war, and what would the relationship in that area between Gaza and Israel look like? Who's going to govern it?
Well, the first thing I'd say is that there have been previous attempts at a two-state solution. The first of them took place in 1948, when the British that were tasked by the United Nations and previously by the League of Nations to establish the lands lost by the Ottoman Empire in World War I, tasked to establish in those lands a modern-day nation-state homeland for the Jewish people in their ancestral lands. But instead of doing that, the British, who had sympathy for the Hashemite clan previously of Mecca, who had been kicked out of Mecca by Ibn Saud, sympathy for them because they fought with them against the Turks in World War I. And out of that sympathy, the British took about, between 70-75% or something of the British mandate destined to be the Jewish homeland, modern day nation state, took it and gave it to the Hashemites, the clan of the Hashemites. And that was called Jordan. There never was a Jordan before that. And so there went 3/4 of the land that the international community, League of Nations, United Nations, had already decided would be for the establishment of a modern day nation state for the Jewish people. So that was the first two-state solution. I mean, that's in addition to the 20-odd other already existing Muslim states, both Sunni and Shiite, in the region. I don't know why they needed another one. Well, yes, I do know why, but that took away 3/4 of that land. And then later on, what was left was partitioned even further. And each time the international community, United Nations, offered the Jewish people their space for land for a modern day nation state, they said yes. And as we know, of course, the Arabs, the Muslims always said no. So that was the first two-state solution. And Jordan, really to this day, is populated in the majority, not just by the Hashemite clan that came from Saudi Arabia, but by immigrants from all over the region, Lebanon, Syria, Egypt, and so forth. That's who's who populates Jordan. So there's your first, perhaps, two-state solution. The second one took place after the year 2005, when the Israelis, completely under the prime ministership of Ariel Sharon, decided to pull out completely from Gaza. Now, Gaza, that little small strip of land between Egypt and Israel, had been under Egyptian control and governance from the Israeli War of Independence in 1948-49 until the Six-Day War in 1967. And during all of that time, it could have been a two-state solution, but nobody thought about that. Then after the Israelis pulled out in 2005, there were elections between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority in 2006, which Hamas won. And by 2007, Hamas were throwing the remaining Palestinian Authority people off the tops of roofs in Gaza. And they took over completely from that point onwards until October of 2023. So whether you count from 2005 or 6 or 7, you're talking about 17 or something years of complete Hamas control of Gaza. So why wasn't that a two-state solution? Why didn't, with all the international aid they were receiving from international organizations through the United Nations and UNRWA, WRA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, with all of that aid, with a wonderful climate. I mean, it's the same climate as Israel to the north. They can grow anything. No, there never was a famine. They can grow anything they want there. Markets are overflowing with produce. As well, people may not know, but Gaza has underneath it one of the largest freshwater aquifers in all the world. So they have water. What they don't have is the electrical pumping stations that would distribute that water as it should be to the people of Gaza, because they use all the income they get and the fuel that they get, part of that from Israel during all those years, by the way, for their war machine. So they've got the water, they've got the climate, they've got a Mediterranean coast that really is quite beautiful.
So why
and
don't
did
the
nothing to
Saudis
it.
want it?
Huh?
Why don't the Saudis go in and take over?
Well, why would they? I mean, it's a briar patch. Why would the Saudis even dream of going in there? They know better. They're not going to get bogged down in a place like that. I mean, here's the other part of this: the people of Gaza are of about 80% Egyptian heritage. They themselves, or a generation or two back, came to Gaza from Egypt. 80 or something percent. The Egyptians obviously don't want them back. They closed the border between Gaza and Egypt, the Sinai Peninsula, after the October 23 invasion. And certainly Jordan doesn't want them because Jordan already had Yasser Arafat and his thugs. And that didn't turn out very well. That's where Black September came from in 1970, when the father of the current King Abdullah, the father King Hussein, had to unleash the Bedouin guards to get them out of Jordan. And then they went next to Lebanon, where they completely destabilized that country. And we'll remember what happened there in 1983, the bombing of the U.S. and French embassies, the U.S. Marine Corps barracks bombing, and Hezbollah. By the way, our Marines were in Beirut at that time to protect Yasser Arafat and the PLO from Israel. So that didn't work out very well. And these people were in Kuwait prior to the 1990 invasion by Iraq by Saddam Hussein. And with whom did they side? They sided, I mean, what were they thinking? With Saddam Hussein. So tens of thousands got kicked out of Kuwait after that. So the point is that every single place these people have been or been involved in, they've caused trouble.
It doesn't work.
A disruptive force. Nobody wants them. Nobody wants to be involved with them. Your question at the beginning really was, what do we do? Like the day after, Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel, advice for hopefully newly reelected President Donald Trump next year. And I think maybe the only answer would be that once Hamas's capabilities, military and governance over Gaza, are no more, once that kind of control over Gaza is gone, the plan already has been mentioned by a few. Mordecai Kedar is one of those who's spoken about this. Is that local clans within Gaza that have not been associated with Hamas, good luck finding some of them, could at least take over civic governance at the local level, meaning the roads, the water, the electricity, that sort of thing. But there's going to have to be an IDF, Israeli Defense Force presence in Gaza for the foreseeable future, much at least like happens in Judea and Samaria, where there is local governance by the Palestinian Authority, but the IDF maintains military control and freedom of movement to ensure that Hamas in Gaza, that is, would not rise again and reestablish itself. I'm thinking here of General MacArthur after the defeat of Japan in World War II, and we didn't just bomb them and then ride away. No, MacArthur stayed there, and Americans stayed there for many years. And what did they do? Not only was the emperor deposed, but they oversaw the complete rewriting of the school curriculum. The teaching within the schools was revamped entirely. So we're talking about a good generation or two, even if that is to be possible, when the school, the teachings, no more of these summer camps where 4 and 5-year-olds are taught how to behead Jews. Okay, that's got to stop. But the only way to ensure that does stop is with supervision at the local level. So again, the clans perhaps not affiliated with Hamas, manage civic affairs at the local level, but the IDF is going to have to be there for quite a while to oversee security, ensure security. And then, obviously, the assistance, financial assistance by the international community, okay, to include Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt, neighbors, as well as international lending organizations or funding philanthropic groups, but to the revamping of the curriculum in Gaza, to the overseeing of the rewriting of the textbooks, the teaching, the curriculum.
Well, we'd like to see that happen in Iran as well. And this is kind of a good segue. We had a massive killing in Dagestan, and it is kind of the same issue there with how Russia controls their terrorist problems in that area as well, and in the northern Caucasus. And it's my understanding from some of the things that I have read recently, reports that their oppressive way of dealing with these terrorist situations just isn't working. And it's doing nothing but destabilizing and getting bigger as well. How do you see Russia clamping down on this recent?
Well, I'm not going to lay the blame for this one at Russia's feet.
Yeah.
What seems from reporting that I've seen so far to have happened is that the Islamic State, the Vilayet Kavkaz, meaning the Islamic State presence in the Northern Caucasus. Here we're talking about Dagestan. Dagestan is a Russian republic that sits on the eastern side of the isthmus that lies between the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea. If you can picture that geography, Dagestan is one of the larger of the republics in that isthmus. Also, there is Ingushetia, there is Chechnya, but Dagestan there on the Caspian side. And this Vilayet Kavkaz of the Islamic State apparently is the responsible party for this attack. It was a jihadi attack. I mean, there's no other way to look at it, against a synagogue and a church. The murder of, I don't know how many people at this point, some of the casualties may still not be making it, beheaded a priest. So obviously, this is an Islamic jihad attack, and Russia doesn't bear responsibility for that. That is the Islamic State.
Right. And are they doing it for simply jihad purposes, or do you think they're doing it to get even, some reparations with Russia?
I think that since about 2014, 2015, when the Middle East central, you might say, headquarters of the Islamic State, in those days it was still called Islamic State in Iraq and Al-Sham, or ISIS, has not been ISIS ever since. It is since then simply Islamic State, Daesh Islamiyya, instead of Daesh Islamiyya fi Iraq wa Al-Sham. And so since that point in time, the central headquarters in the Middle East there dispatched groups to establish footholds to the north in Afghanistan, where we have the Islamic State Khorasan, and here we have the Vilayet Kavkaz unit in the Caucasus. So it is a deliberate attempt by the Islamic State to expand its jihadist footprint now further north up into the Caucasus. Now we'll remember, of course, historically, that isthmus, as I said, that lies between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea has been the passageway, the thoroughfare of Islamic jihad invasions aimed at Russia for centuries. This is not new. It's just a newer group that was formed, within the last 20 years or something. But that's what they're doing. The Islamic State is trying to expand its footprint into the Caucasus.
So this brings me back to something that you and I talked about probably about a year ago, maybe even a year and a half ago. And I brought up Ramzan Kadyrov when we were talking about then, and I kind of made the point that I thought that he was making headway with Putin. And your remark at the time was, well, not so much. Ramzan is going to do whatever Putin tells him to do. And so after watching it as much as I watch it, since that time, since the invasion, really, you're completely 100% right about that. Because Kadyrov, even though he is in charge of Chechnya, he seems to be kind of a public works guy and a builder and a public servant almost, in a way, with the economic advancements and things. They're rebuilding Grozny. And so he's really proud of that. And his Telegram channel is just full of people he's celebrating and patting on the back. But he pays homage to Putin as his father at least a couple of times a week. And so it seems like Putin's relationships with most people that he controls like that, probably Lukashenko and Belarus, it's a one-way street. And these are the relationships that he has with these people. He tells them what to do, and they do what he says. Does he have that kind of relationship with Iran and North Korea? Is he in charge here?
No, not at all. Russia has the relationships with Iran, with North Korea, as we saw just recently in the last few days, the visit by Putin to Pyongyang, to North Korea, and his summit meetings with Kim Jong-un. But there in Chechnya, Ramzan Kadyrov gets to be the strong man in charge because Putin lets him. And as long as he toes the line for Putin and keeps Chechnya under control for Russia, he gets to continue being the strong man there. That's it. That's all there is.
Sure. So he's on more. So Putin is on more of an equal footing with North Korea and Iran. Well, it's not the same kind of relationship like he has. I guess my question is, how much influence and control does Putin have over Iran?
Does not. That's a partnership. I'm not even sure I would call it of equals, but in any case, they are aligned. Iran provides, for example, drones to Russia for use in its attacks against Ukraine. The two, if we go back in history, Russia and the old Persian Empire were not exactly on the best of terms. They were enemies. But right now, for the moment, their interests are aligned because add China into that, and North Korea, but the three major powers, Russia, Iran, and China, aligned to take on the free world, essentially, to oppose the U.S.-led world order of sovereign nation states. And here you can see that both a neo-empirical Russia has the same view of the international sovereign nation state system as does the supreme leader of Iran, the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, which is to say that globalism, they are globalists. Of course, so is Xi Jinping in China. They don't believe in borders. They believe in conquest, all of them, for different reasons and in their different regional areas of dominance. But I mean, think about it, China, for example, right? Or in Iran and Russia, all three. None of these is actually a nation state as we of the West would think about it, a sovereign nation state, as in, I don't know, European countries, the United States. No, rather, each of these, China, Iran, and Russia, is an empire built of conquered peoples, conquered nations. In China, what do you have? You have the Manchurians, the Mongols, the Tibetans, the Cantonese, now Hong Kong. How about the Uyghurs? They're all conquered peoples forcibly incorporated into an empire. Well, that's how Vladimir Putin thinks of himself and of Russia too, wanting to reestablish as much of the old Russian Empire, I guess, in the mold of a Catherine the Great or a Peter the Great or one of the old time, czars of Russia, to grab as much as he can and reincorporate it back into at least the Soviet Union, which whose dissolution back in 1991, Putin has often said was the worst catastrophe of his life, and he wants to reform, that is, to re-put together that Russian empire, or at least the Soviet Union. And he does that by conquest. He does it by a globalist perspective on how to build an empire. That's what he's doing. That's what China does. Now looking at Taiwan, right? And certainly that is Iran, which is also made up of many minority and conquered peoples. The Kurds, the Ahwaz Arabs, the Azeris, on and on. These are conquered peoples. They're not. They didn't willingly decide that they would like to be part of the old Persian Empire, today's Islamic regime in Tehran.
Well, it seems to be a very dangerous time. And I think just in the last 3 days, in looking generally at the news, I know in my lifetime, I have never heard such alarming narratives. And there's so many more people that have the ability to come out and speak and, tell their analysis and their opinions and whatnot. And some of the narrative that is out there is that the United States is in grave danger, is in grave trouble, that our military is not ready for this. And, we are slowly approaching a worldwide kinetic situation. So how much danger do you think that we are in?
The danger that we're in is not so much coming at us from outside of the United States, although there are, as we've just talked about, any number of flashpoints in the world right now. It is rather the withdrawal of U.S. power and influence from the world on purpose, deliberately, that does leave the kind of vacuum there that invites aggression, as Putin's invasion of Ukraine. But here at home, I think, is our biggest challenge right now, and that reminds me of John Adams. I think I mean to say Benjamin Franklin, I should say, who was asked upon coming out of Philadelphia Hall, the long discussions there about forming a constitution, about writing a constitution for the United States, which even after the end of our Revolutionary War in 1987, we did not yet have the Constitution we have today, but they slaved over it, they labored over it, through the next couple of years until 1789. And Benjamin Franklin comes out of the hall, met by a woman, you'll remember this story, right? Who asks him, well, what have you given us? What form of government do we have? And Benjamin Franklin says, a republic, madam, if you can keep it. That's the challenge, isn't it? We're coming up on 250 years of our republic, and the threat is from within, partly because of infiltration from without. I'm thinking of a wide open southern border. I mean, what country in the history of the world deliberately opened its borders to invasion by thugs, criminals, gangs, traffickers, and enemy forces by the millions? Well, I can think of Germany, perhaps.
Germany, I was going to say Germany.
Back in 2015, under Frau Merkel. But who does that, really? In the history of the world, that's practically unheard of. So infiltration from without, but also the 100-year-long infiltration of the United States by communist and Marxist ideology. And Christopher Rufo has a very good book out. I think I put it in the other room, but It is called America's Cultural Revolution by Christopher Rufo. Finished reading it a couple months ago, I guess. And it's this story of how the communist Marxist ideology and agenda has been insinuated into the institutions of our society, beginning with academia, then, of course, government at every level, even our faith communities, also, of course, media and businesses, Wall Street, sports, entertainment, public health, you name it. Today, of course, that infiltration is not led by Russia anymore. Putin is a second-rate power. Russia's a second-rate power now with nukes, but a second-rate power. It's headquartered in China. China is elder brother in this relationship with Russia today, and it is China that has the leadership of the international communist movement today, and they have infiltrated every institution I just named in our society, and we've let that happen. So we've got a big job ahead of us in terms of returning this republic of ours, back to its foundational principles. There are many who want nothing more than to help do that, Americans and leadership figures too. We hope there are more of them. And it's why these presidential elections of ours coming up on November the 5th are so important.
We have a massive job to do in cleaning up our universities. You can just go through social media and there are countless organizations and groups that have banded together for decolonialization, oppressive narratives. Black Lives Matter narratives are still alive, Palestinian narratives, anti-capitalist narratives. They're all under these communist umbrellas. For just destabilizing the United States. And there's class after class after class in these universities that, could be an arts class or it could be a film class or something, but they always put some other type of title in it, the film class for decolonization or the arts class for decolonization. And I can't imagine any administrator, like you said, who in their right mind would open up the border to millions of people coming in. It's kind of the same, type of thinking in these universities. They've allowed it to just disintegrate into such ridiculousness. And YouTube is full of student university channels where they will interview some of these student protesters that are out there right now. And when you hear the things that they think and the things that they say about Israel and the United States, and there's tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of students all across the United States at over 300 campuses that have this ideology. And we've allowed this to happen. Our kids are sick, they're indoctrinated, and I'm not sure what kind of lives they're going to have when they leave college. And it's a really sad situation. So I'm hoping that some of the university administrators can see this now that they're out there rioting and building barricades and fighting and spray painting, and they can see how out of control it really is, because it is out of control. And so now that you have the student protests for Gaza and anti-Israel protests, well, they have something else to fight about now, and that's the police brutality that came in to clamp down on the mob violence happening on our campuses. So I'm not sure how we're going to clean up these ideologies and these narratives that are just so thick in our universities now.
Well, obviously, we're going to have to start where it all began. We'll recall that back in the 1920s, 30s, the Soviet Union, following the Russian Revolution of 1917, sought to export that revolution abroad. And they used the vehicle of what's called the Comintern, Communist International, to do that. And they looked first at Germany as what they thought the most likely next target for the communist revolution. However, back in the 20s and 30s, as we'll recall, was the time of the rise of the Nazis, of Hitler and the Nazi Party. And there were pitched battles in the streets of German cities. The brown shirts, of course, were the Nazis. The black shirts, black worn by the communist forces. And this is where Antifa actually comes from. Antifa, of course, is short for anti-fascist, or in the original German, Antifaschistische Aktion. And that's where they tried to gain a foothold, but did not succeed because the Nazis essentially kicked them out. Well, where did they go? They went from Germany and looked at their next best likely target, and that was the United States of America. And where did they get their foothold? You know? No?
No.
Columbia University.
Oh, right. Okay.
In the faculty lounges of Columbia University. And from there, spreading out through many other universities across the country, just as you say. So beginning where, it started, is where we're going to have to go back. And I think that will happen. The black shirted ones, that's why Antifa to this day are called Black Bloc, because they're dressed in head to toe, helmets to jackets to, everything in black. Where did that come from? That comes from the original communists that got their start in Germany. But we have to go back to our universities. And what's happening, I think, is that, first of all, parents are beginning to say, whoa, wait a minute, this is not what we're paying, I don't know, $80,000 a year for Johnny and Susie to be indoctrinated to become little communists. The other place that is having an effect, the other group that's having an effect, I think, are alumni. Alumni of these institutions are about fed up to here with what they're seeing and disgusted at what's happening at their old, alumni universities. And so their donations, the funding has to be cut off. Another place I think that can make an effect, and this is where Congress, if it would, does have the power of the purse to cut off federal funding for any of these schools that receive it, but that permit, allow, encourage these Jew-hating, pro-Hamas kinds of disturbances. Well, this is June now. It's only a couple of months, really, before some of these students start heading back to campus. In August, they start going back, right? So I think all of the above can begin to make headway within these universities. The parents have to decide they're not going to spend that kind of money anymore. Their kids are going to go to some other university. The alumni can stop their donations, and Congress can take steps to cut off federal funding for these places that allow and encourage this sort of thing.
So one last question, I guess. This is such a great conversation. We could talk about the students and what's going on in the campuses all day. But what do you do with a Pan-African out communist group? We seem to have those around Columbia and Emerson and some of these other schools back there where you have a Pan-African communist group that's pushing communism in the community. They'll be tabling at various events. They also have social media. They hook up with the university students. There's plenty of those around as well. And what can you do? What can you do about those? We've allowed communist groups to thrive in the United States for decades.
Well, I'll suggest a website for you and our listeners. It is marchforgaza.org. March numeral 4 Gaza.org. That's the website for a January 2024, just 6 months ago, so-called rally that took place in Washington, D.C., a pro-Hamas rally that descended into a mob by the nightfall, when we might remember they tried to assault the White House. But there had been fencing put up previously all around the area of the White House, and with the Secret Service, they were not able to breach that fencing, thank goodness. And the president and First Lady were not there anyway. They were at Camp David that weekend. But if you go to that website, again, marchforgaza.org, there is a button there that says something like signatory supporters or something like that. Mm-hmm. And if you go to that tab on the website, you will see a list of those who were not all necessarily there and part of the mob on that day in mid-January, but did sign on to the list as supporters of it. And there are over 350 group names on that list. This is not one or two. This is over 350. It reads like a who's who of the Muslim Brotherhood in America, CAIR, Council of American Islamic Relations, ISNA, Islamic Society of North America, ICNA, Islamic Circle of North America, MAS, Muslim American Society, MPAC, Muslim Public Affairs Council, on and on and on, right? Unindicted co-conspirators in the Holy Land Foundation trial of 2008 among them. And you might call that the green part of the red-green axis, but on the red side, a long list of communists, outright communist organizations, like World Workers' Party, like Young Communists of DC, like any number of
the RevComs,
RevCom USA,
right?
All of these different groups that are openly, avowedly communist. So
right.
Take a look at that website, take a look at that list, understand that this is not something small. This is not one or two groups here and there. This is over 350 long list of groups. That's who's going to be on the streets this summer. That's who's going to be going after Jewish students, synagogues, as they did in Los Angeles last night. That is who our local law enforcement are going to have to be on the alert for, aware of what they're doing, what they're planning in their own neighborhoods. The feds are not going to come to the rescue this time. They didn't in 2020. They're not in 2024. Forget the feds. They're not going to help. For what all we know, they sympathize with these guys.
They're very open. They're more open now than they were probably in 2020 about their activities. Yeah. I mean, they have toolkits that you can go and learn how to make things to go to the protests with, and how to deal with counter protesters and how to riot. And there's even people out there who will travel around for several $100s a day and help you lead your resistance protest, how to set up barricades. I mean, all of it. And it's just all out there on the internet for anybody to radicalize and anybody to use.
Right. And now remember that Antifa, for example, is not a hierarchical top-down org chart kind of an organization.
Yeah.
It's horizontal. It has cells in cities and communities all over America that are loosely linked horizontally. But I want to mention one other thing that's really important here, and that is that among all these millions that have come across our wide open southern border, the northern border too, in these last 3.5+ years, are thousands upon thousands of People's Liberation Army of China Special Operations Jungle Tigers.
Right.
And not only them, but here also inside the United States, we have allowed special police stations, which are not diplomatic facilities of China. We have allowed special, what they call service stations, again, not diplomatic facilities of China, but they're allowed. In addition to China's 1 embassy, 4 consulates remaining. Let's look back real quick at 2020, when then Secretary of State Mike Pompeo closed down Beijing's Houston consulate, leaving 4 remaining. And he said it was because they were engaged there in intellectual property theft and espionage. Well, if that were the case, which I'm sure it was, then why the other 4 consulates remain open? Well, there was something more going on there, and I wish it had been made more public, but what was going on there is what's going on now. The Chinese Communist Party has a unit subordinate to the Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party, and it's called the United Front Work Department. It is responsible for narratives, information operations, propaganda, both inside China domestically and abroad, especially here in the United States. Well, in 2020, the PLA, People's Liberation Army, sent a unit to Houston under embassy cover to compile a list. Data mining AI collection made a list of American names they thought would be susceptible to messaging about joining in these riots and street violence that were going on that summer in cities across America. So they did that. They made their list. And then they created TikTok videos. And they sent the TikTok videos directly out to the names on their list. Well, what do we think they're doing now? They're doing the same thing. They're using social media, in particular TikTok, to align with the violence and the chaos they hope to instigate inside the United States this year, particularly leading up to the November elections, but I think also the next 2 months too that lie between elections and Inauguration Day in January of 2025. They are here in the United States using their outposts that I just named before to as platforms to instigate and encourage street violence that we're going to see increasingly throughout the rest of this year.
And they know who to activate as well. So
yes, they do. They have an alliance, I mean, with Antifa figures.
Right.
At that time, it was Black Lives Matter. I don't know how much of them are still left over, but whatever remnants there may be. But other street violent actors, yeah.
Right. So thank you for coming on the channel, Claire, and talking with me today. I really appreciate it. You're so dedicated and you're devoted and you're very generous with your time, and I'm really happy to call you a friend.
Thank you. The same for you, and glad to be on the show with you and to come back if you'd like to continue the discussion as things heat up this summer.
Well, it's definitely going to do that. We're going to be keeping our eye on it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Tell everybody where they can find you.
Well, I do not have a website, but I do post all of my interviews like this one and things that I publish and write at the American Truth Project, at the Citizens Commission on National Security, at the Near East Center for Strategic Engagement, where I'm on their board of advisors. And I'm also on social media. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, Telegram, and of course, Truth Social.
We'll see you there.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.